The Rings of Power Easter Eggs. The latest spin-off from the Lord of the Ring franchise, The Rings of Power, were quite well reciprocated by the audience. Only the first season has been released yet, but the stunning visuals, grand score and sharp performances from the star cast are what everybody can't stop talking about right now. Although The Rings of Power had a little slow start, the conclusions is what successfully grabs the audience. The show ended with a shocking banger, leaving the viewers wanting more. Well, that is not an issue, as it is now official that Season 2 has already been on the roll. Just like all of the Lords of the Rings movie, how could The Rings of Power not have hidden preferences and Easter eggs? After digging a lot deeper, several hidden details and Easter eggs were worth appreciating, as now it puts the movie all together. So, without any further ado, let's take a look into some of the tiny details the makers hid inside a few scenes quite smartly. Scratches on the hands of Finrod. Well, if you thought the Easter eggs were fitted into the last 2 episodes only, then you are wrong. It doesn't take long for the makers to introduce us to one as early as in the prologue itself. In the scene showcasing Galadriel sitting beside a dead body and narrating the story about it, it turns out she was actually describing the life of her fallen brother, Finrod Velaryon. Although it is not a surprise that Finrod's entire body was filled with cuts and wounds, especially around his arms. But one of these cuts specifically is the one that raised questions. The mark was actually put by Sauron on him. In Silmarillion, it was shown Finrod helps Beren and Lúthien to reclaim a few of their lost possessions. During the same process, they are hindered in between by a werewolf who was actually Sauron before he turned into the Dark Lord. The wolf tried to capture and attack them and was almost stopped by Finrod to an extent, but in the end he himself was torn to death. Hence, if you thought the marks of Finrod's body were from a war, then let us tell you that it was actually from the werewolf Sauron, who precisely marked him all by himself way before. Finrod in the Oath of Fëanor. Another early Easter egg dropped by the makers was during the scene showing a bunch of elves drawing their swords together in order to gain power. Although if you have watched the Silmarillion, then you might be familiar with Tolkien's lore. Referring to that, it has been predicted that Galadriel's brother Finrod is one of the elves in the pack. The prologue of the show takes us back into a Middle-earth history event where the oath is taken by the famous elfish character Fëanor and his 7 sons. If it is Fëanor's oath, then only the 7 sons should be a part of it. But considering the fact that Finrod was there too, it could be a sign that it wasn't actually the Oath of Fëanor at all. It could be critical to the stories that follow. Moreover, the origin and placement of the scene, which might be after Finrod's death, is a little bit unsettling. But future films could make this make sense, doesn't it? The further wars. The Rings of Power could actually hint at the Battle of Unnumbered Tears and the War of Wrath as well. Earlier, it was believed that Rings of Power don't actually have much relations to the Silmarillion book, which is why a lot of dots could not connect. On the other hand, few connections are easy to identify, like the previously mentioned Oath of Fëanor. We could derive the other connections easily from a few segments, like a scene where a dragon throws a giant eagle to the ground, a similar event that happened during the War of Wrath that had a timeline before the Rings of Power. War of Wrath finally marks the defeat of the first Dark Lord. But that is not all. When Galadriel picks up a helmet, she subconsciously puts it at the top of another pile of helmets. This sign certainly reminds of the Hill of the Slain, where they were a giant mountain of carcasses. Even if it wasn't an indirect reference, it could definitely hint at Galadriel's sorrow as she remembered the pain of that war at least. Swan boats. During an extended editions of the Fellowship of the Ring, Galadriel was seen sailing a swan boat in Lothlorien. In the Rings of Power, a similar scene showing Galadriel sailing to another place with a similar bird-like prow hints at something bigger. Without even going overboard with details, we can connect the dots between Tolkien and the Rings of Power. A group of elves that live in Valinor, or the place where Galadriel is headed to reside in a palace known as Alqualon. The place roughly translates itself to the Haven of Swans. In the Silmarillion book, it is explained about this group of elves and their home, how the city of Valinor is where these swan-like boats, having eyes and beaks of gold, are prepared. Hence, these swans-like boats are considered a trademark of elfish maritime activities. Could this hint at something coming up in Season 2? Nose reference in the last episode. The finale of the series was filled with groundbreaking moments and revelation. The final Easter eggs dropped in the last episode. Evidence confirms the stranger's identity. It was told that the stranger came falling down from the sky like a meteor. If you're a die-hard Lord of the Rings fan, then you would easily catch it could be one of either Sauron, Tom Bombadil, or Gandalf. Out of the three, fans are speculating that the chances of the stranger being Gandalf the Grey are pretty high. The moment he tells Nori to follow her nose whenever she is in doubt confirms his identity. In the Fellowship of the Ring, Gandalf quotes that whenever he is unable to find the way, he just smells his path forward. Hence, this could be a smart hint of actually confirming that the stranger might be Gandalf after all.